My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 32 and I sell houses for a living, but before I was any of that, I was Linda's son. I said that to the hospital receptionist without thinking. She looked at me with soft eyes and asked, "Are you family?" "I'm her only family," I replied. "Please, I got a call." An hour earlier, my phone had rung while I was closing a deal. "Is this Ethan Cole?" a nurse asked. "Yes. Is this about my mom?" My chest tightened. "Is she conscious?" There was a pause. "Sir, just come as quickly as you can." I hung up and called my wife. "Vanessa, it's Mom." She collapsed. "I'm heading to the hospital." She sighed. "Ethan, I'm literally at the salon." "Cancel it," I said. "Please, I need you there. Is it serious?" They wouldn't tell me much. She went quiet, then said, "Okay, I'll see what I can do." "Vanessa," I whispered, gripping the steering wheel. "I'm scared." I said, "I'll see what I can do." I ended the call feeling alone. My mother raised me by herself after my father died when I was 10. She worked double shifts, packed my lunches, sat in the front row at every school event. When I bought my first car, I handed her the keys first and said, "You drove me everywhere. Now it's my turn." She laughed and said, "Just promise me one thing, Ethan." "Anything." "Don't build your life around people who don't build with you." I pushed that memory away as I ran through the hospital doors. "I'm here for Linda Cole," I told the receptionist. She made a call. A doctor came out. His face told me everything before his words did. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cole, we did everything we could." "No," I said. "I just talked to her this morning." "She suffered a massive stroke." I shook my head. "Can I see her?" He nodded. I walked into the room. She looked peaceful, like she was sleeping. I touched her hand. It was already cold. "Mom," I whispered, "I'm here." Silence answered me. "I wasn't ready," I said, my voice breaking. "You can't leave me like this." I stood there alone for a long time. My phone buzzed. I thought it was Vanessa calling. It was a text. "Babe, I already promised the girls I'd go tonight. We'll talk later." I stared at the screen. I called her immediately. She answered after 3 rings. Music blasted in the background. "Ethan?" "I can't talk long. She's gone," I said. "What?" "Mom is gone." There was a pause. "Oh my God, that's awful." "Are you coming?" "I told you I already committed to tonight." "Everyone's counting on me." I felt something crack inside me. "Look bad?" I repeated. "Don't start fighting right now," she said. "We'll talk tomorrow." "Vanessa," I said slowly. "I'm standing next to my mother's body." She went quiet. "I'm sorry," she muttered. "I just don't handle death well." "You handle parties just fine." "That's not fair." I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. I looked at my mother again. "It's just me now," I told her. My phone lit up with another notification. Vanessa had posted a selfie. Red lipstick. Smiling. Caption: "Girls' night." I turned the screen off. For the first time in my marriage, I felt completely alone. "I'll handle the flowers," I told the funeral director. He nodded gently. "What did your mother like?" "White lila," I said. "She said they looked honest." "Honest?" "She hated fake things." He wrote that down. I swallowed hard. I called Vanessa on my way out. "Ethan, of course I will. I need you next to me." I said, "I'll be there." "Stop asking like I'm unreliable." I almost laughed at that, but I didn't have the energy. The next day, I stood in the florist shop holding a bundle of white lily. "These are beautiful," the florist said. "She deserves beautiful." I replied. I imagined Vanessa standing beside me at the church, holding my hand. I told myself the hospital night was just bad timing. People make mistakes. Grief makes people weird. Saturday morning came too fast. I adjusted my black tie in the mirror and called out, "Vanessa, we need to leave in 10 minutes. Silence. I walked into the bedroom. Empty. I checked my phone. No message. I called her. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Where are you?" No reply. At the church entrance, my cousin Daniel hugged me. "I'm so sorry, man." "Thanks," I said. He looked around. "Where's Vanessa?" "She's sick," I lied quickly. "Food poisoning. That's rough timing." "Yeah," I muttered. Inside, I stood near the casket greeting relatives. "Aunt Maria," I said softly. She squeezed my hands. "Your mother was proud of you?" "I hope so. She talked about you every time I saw her." My throat tightened. "Thank you for coming." As the service started, I sat alone in the front row. The empty seat beside me felt louder than the pastor's voice. Halfway through the sermon, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again. I glanced down. Instagram notification. Vanessa had been tagged in a thought. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Rooftop lights, music, a glass raised in the air. She was wearing a tight red dress, smiling wide. The caption read, "Weekend vibes with my favorites." My hand started shaking. Daniel leaned toward me. "You okay?" "She's not sick," I whispered. "What?" I turned the phone toward him. He stared at the screen. "You've got to be kidding me," he said under his breath. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Every whisper in the church suddenly felt like it was about me. Aunt Maria leaned closer. "Where's your wife, Ethan?" "She's busy," I said. Maria's eyes softened, but her voice turned sharp. I looked at my mom's casket and thought about the nights she stayed up sewing my school uniforms because we couldn't afford new ones. I thought about her clapping louder than anyone at my graduation, and my wife was dancing on a rooftop. I clenched my jaw. Daniel whispered, "Do you want me to say something to her?" "No," I said. "Not here." "You don't have to protect her." "I'm not," I replied. "I'm protecting myself." The pastor said, "Linda was a woman of loyalty." The word echoed in my head. Loyalty. I stared at the empty seat again. After the burial, relatives gathered around me. "Call us if you need anything," Maria said. "I'm not going to." He studied my face. "You look different. Maybe I am." As everyone slowly left, I stood by the grave alone. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered. "I should have listened more." My phone buzzed again. A text from Vanessa. "Hope the service went okay. We need to talk about your attitude lately." I stared at the words. My attitude. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Something inside me went quiet. Not calm. I walked into our house after the burial and shut the door behind me. The silence felt heavy, like the walls were watching me. "This was supposed to be our dream," I muttered, running my hand across the kitchen counter my mother helped me pick out. I dropped my keys and sat on the couch. "You loved this place, Mom," I whispered to myself. My phone stayed face down on the table. Vanessa hadn't called again. I looked around at the framed wedding photo on the wall. Was any of it real? I asked out loud. The house felt bigger than usual, colder. I checked the clock. Midnight passed, then 1. I didn't move. I just sat there replaying the funeral, the empty seat, the red dress. "She chose a party," I said under my breath. "Over my mother." At 2:07 a.m. I heard the front door unlock. Vanessa stumbled in, heels in one hand, phone in the other. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" she asked, flipping on the lights. I blinked. "Where were you?" I asked quietly. She rolled her eyes. "Don't start." I stood up. "You promised you'd be there." She tossed her purse onto the table. "It was just one night, Ethan. Stop being dramatic." The words hit me harder than a slap. "Dramatic?" I repeated. "My mother was buried today." She sighed loudly. "I told you I don't handle funerals well, so you handle rooftop bars instead?" I shot back. She crossed her arms. "I needed a distraction." "From what?" "Supporting your husband?" I asked. She shook her head. "You're twisting this." I felt my chest burn. "You weren't there." I said, "I'm sorry," she snapped. "What more do you want?" "I wanted my wife next to me," I said. "Just once." She grabbed her phone as it buzzed. "I'm not doing this right now." "Doing what?" I demanded. "Holding you accountable?" She turned toward the door. "I need air." I watched her step outside onto the porch, already dialing someone. "Yeah, I'm outside," she said into the phone, laughing softly. I stood frozen in the hallway. Something inside me shifted again, but this time it wasn't quiet. It was clear. I walked to the door slowly. My hands were shaking, but my mind wasn't. She paced outside, back turned to me. "He's overreacting," she said into the phone. "I can't deal with his mood." That was it. I stepped forward and pulled the door shut. Then I turned the lock. A second later, she tried the handle. It didn't move. She knocked once. Then harder. "Ethan?" she called. I didn't answer. The knocking turned into pounding. "Are you serious right now?" I walked closer but stayed on the inside. "Open the door," she demanded. I leaned my forehead against the wood. "No, you're insane." "Open it," she shouted. "You don't get to lock me out," I swallowed. "For once, Vanessa, you stay outside." There was silence for 3 seconds. Then she hit the door again. "This is my house." "No," I said firmly. "It's mine." My voice didn't shake this time. "You're embarrassing yourself," she yelled. "Neighbors will hear." "Let them," I replied. She went quiet again. Then softer. "Ethan, stop. This isn't funny." "Neither was today," I said. I stepped back from the door. I could hear her breathing on the other side. I expected guilt. I expected fear. Instead, I felt something new. Control. She banged one last time. You'll regret this. I closed my eyes. No, I whispered to myself. I won't. And for the first time since my mother died, I felt like I wasn't the one being left outside. My phone didn't stop ringing the next morning. Vanessa's name kept flashing across the screen. I let it ring. Then it buzzed with texts. Open the door. We need to talk. You're being childish. I stared at the messages and felt nothing but exhaustion. Childish? I muttered to myself. I buried my mother yesterday. The phone rang again. I answered but didn't speak. Ethan, finally, she snapped. You embarrassed me last night. I laughed quietly. I embarrassed you? Yes, I had to sleep in my car. You chose that, I replied. You chose a party over my mother. She exhaled loudly. You're still on that? Still on that? I repeated. It's been 24 hours. She went silent for a moment. You're not the only one hurting, she said. Then where were you? I asked. She didn't answer. I hung up. Daniel showed up around noon. He looked at me carefully. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't, I said. He stepped inside and glanced at the door. She's still outside? She left early, I replied. He nodded slowly. You did what most guys wouldn't. Locked my wife out? I asked. Stopped accepting disrespect, he corrected. I sat down at the kitchen table. Was I blind, Daniel? He leaned against the counter. You loved her. That's not what I asked. He hesitated. You ignored things, I swallowed. Like Marcus? Daniel's jaw tightened. Yeah, like Marcus. I rubbed my face. I never liked how close they were. You said that once, he reminded me, and she said I was insecure. And you backed off, he said gently. I stared at the floor. I didn't want to lose her. Daniel looked straight at me. You've always been the one trying, not her. His words hit deeper than he knew. I remembered birthdays I planned alone because she was busy. Dinners with my mom that Vanessa skipped because Marcus needed her advice. Nights I waited up while she said, It's just friends, relax. I whispered, I thought marriage meant compromise. Daniel shook his head. Compromise isn't one person shrinking. My phone buzzed again. Vanessa. I silenced it. You scared of being alone? Daniel asked quietly. I didn't answer at first. Then I nodded. After Dad died, it was just me and Mom. I promised myself I'd never be alone like that again. So you held on tighter, he said. Even when she pulled away. Vanessa showed up the next morning with sunglasses on and anger in her voice. She banged on the door until I opened it halfway. Move, she demanded. I'm coming inside. I didn't step aside. You can grab your things, I said calmly. But we're not pretending nothing happened. She pushed past me anyway. You don't get to decide that alone, she snapped. I closed the door behind her. Actually, I replied, I do. She spun around. This is my house too. I held her gaze. No, it's not, she laughed sharply. Excuse me? I walked to the cabinet and pulled out the folder my mother insisted I keep. The deed is in my name. The mortgage is in my name. I bought this before we got married. Her face changed. That doesn't matter. We're married. It matters legally, I said, and financially. She stared at me like I had just betrayed her. You planned this? No, I answered. My mother told me to protect what I build. I could almost hear Mom's voice. Protect what you build, Ethan. Vanessa shook her head. So you never trusted me? I trusted you with everything else, I said quietly. That was my mistake. She paced across the living room. You're being cruel. Cruel? I repeated. You partied during my mother's funeral. She threw her hands up. I said I was sorry. Sorry doesn't erase choices. She stopped walking and looked at me carefully. What do you want? She asked. The question felt strange. I thought for a moment. Peace, I said. She scoffed. You're dramatic. No, I replied. I'm done ignoring things. Her phone buzzed. She flipped it face down quickly. I noticed. Marcus? I asked. Don't start. I'm not starting, I said. I'm finishing. Her jaw tightened. You can't just throw me out. I'm not throwing you out, I said evenly. I'm setting boundaries. She stepped closer. If you push this, I'll file for divorce. She said it like a threat, like I would fall apart. I felt the old fear rise in my chest, but it didn't control me this time. I looked at her and said softly, maybe divorce is freedom. She blinked like she didn't expect that. You don't mean that, she said. Try me, I replied. I walked into my office and picked up my phone. Who are you calling? She demanded, following me. A lawyer. You're insane, she said. No, I answered, dialing. I'm serious. The receptionist answered and I asked for an appointment. Mr. Howard Klein has availability this afternoon, she said. I'll take it. Vanessa crossed her arms. You're really doing this? Yes. Over one mistake? She challenged. I looked at her carefully. This isn't one mistake. It's a pattern. She opened her mouth to argue, but didn't. That silence told me more than any confession could. You think you can scare me with legal talk? She asked finally. I'm not trying to scare you, I replied. I'm protecting myself. Later that afternoon, I sat across from Mr. Klein in his office. Tell me everything, he said. I did. The funeral. The finances, the threats. He listened without interrupting. Legally, he said after a pause, the house is yours. Since it was purchased before marriage and remains solely titled, you're in a strong position. I nodded slowly. What are my options? I asked. Separation, asset protection. If divorce happens, documentation will matter. I exhaled. I don't want revenge, I said. I want stability. He leaned forward. Then act decisively. I thought about my mother standing in this house the day I signed the papers. She smiled and said, You built this with sweat, Ethan. Never let anyone make you feel small inside it. I swallowed hard. I won't, I whispered. When I returned home, Vanessa was sitting on the couch. So? She asked. I put the folder on the table. The house was never yours, I said again, but this time there was no anger in my voice. Just clarity. She stared at me, and for the first time I saw uncertainty in her eyes. You've changed, she said quietly. No, I answered. I've stopped pretending. I looked around the room, at the walls my mother helped paint. At the kitchen she admired, at the foundation I worked years to build. This place was never about status, it was about effort. About sacrifice. About love. And suddenly I understood something simple and painful at the same time. I wasn't losing a dream. I was protecting it. I'm listing it, I said out loud to the empty kitchen, just to hear the words. The house echoed back at me like it was testing my resolve. When Vanessa found out, Daniel sent the photos at 9:14 p.m. My phone buzzed while I was sitting on the floor of the half-empty living room. You need to see this, his text said. I opened the first image and felt my jaw tighten. Vanessa and Marcus were at a restaurant, sitting too close, his hand on her lower back. The second photo was worse. They were outside his apartment building. She was laughing, her head tilted toward his shoulder. I called Daniel immediately. How long? I asked. I don't know, he replied, but it doesn't look new. I stared at the screen again. I need to hear it from her, I said. You sure? He asked. Yeah, I answered. I'm done guessing. I drove to Marcus's apartment without calling first. When Vanessa opened the door, her face drained of color. Ethan, what are you doing here? I stepped inside slowly. Marcus stood near the kitchen, arms crossed. You shouldn't just show up, he said. I ignored him and looked at her. Tell me the truth. She shook her head. It's not what you think. I held up my phone, then explained this. She glanced at the photos and looked away. We're just close friends. I let out a dry laugh. Friends don't look like that. Marcus stepped forward. You're overreacting. I turned to him. Stay out of this. He smirked. Maybe you should have paid more attention to your wife. I felt heat rise in my chest but forced my voice to stay steady. I'm asking her. Vanessa's eyes filled with frustration. You've been distant, she said. Your mom, your work, everything. I stared at her in disbelief. My mother died, I said quietly. That's your defense? She crossed her arms. I felt alone. I took a step closer. So you ran to him? She hesitated. That pause answered more than words could. How long? I asked again. A few months, she whispered. My stomach twisted. Before the funeral? She didn't respond. Before? I pressed. Yes, she admitted. The word hit like a punch. Marcus finally spoke again. You were never enough for her. I looked at him slowly. Enough for what? He shrugged. She needed excitement. I felt something fierce ignite inside me, but it wasn't rage. It was clarity. You could have left, I said to her. You could have told me you were unhappy. She wiped her face. I didn't want to hurt you. I laughed bitterly. You think this doesn't? Marcus scoffed. You're acting like a victim. I turned to him fully. This isn't about you. It kind of is, he replied smugly. I stepped closer until we were face to face. You think you won something? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. I looked back at Vanessa. Did you love him? I asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I don't know, she said finally. That was worse than a yes. The room felt small suddenly. You lied to me, I said. Every time I asked, I was confused, she insisted. No, I replied. You were dishonest. Marcus shook his head. You're too serious, man. She wanted someone who lived. I stared at him for a long second. Living isn't betrayal, I said calmly. It's choice. I surprised even myself with how steady I sounded. Vanessa looked at me like she was seeing someone new. Say something, she whispered. I nodded slowly. I walked toward the door. That's it? Marcus called after me. I paused without turning around. You were never enough for her, he repeated mockingly. I finally looked back at both of them. Maybe, I said, but I'm enough for myself, and with that, I walked out. I didn't slam the door, I didn't shout, I didn't fight. The calm scared them more than anger ever could. And for the first time, I felt stronger walking away than I ever had staying. A week after I walked out of Marcus's apartment, Daniel called me again. You sitting down? He asked. I'm fine, I replied. What happened? He exhaled. Marcus's business partner found out he's been moving money around. There's talk of fraud. I stayed quiet for a second. That's not my problem, I said. I know, Daniel replied. But Vanessa's name is getting dragged into it because she's been everywhere with him. I leaned back in my chair inside my new apartment. The place was small, plain, almost empty. People are connecting dots, Daniel continued. Sponsors are pulling away from her events. She's losing followers. I closed my eyes. I don't wish her harm, I said slowly. But I'm not surprised. Daniel paused. You sound different. I am, I answered. I'm done reacting. Later that night, my phone rang. Vanessa. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. What? I asked quietly. Her voice was shaky. Can we talk? We already did. Please, she said. Things are falling apart. I stayed silent. Marcus is in trouble. She rushed out. People are saying things about me too. Are they true? I asked calmly. That's not the point. She snapped, then softened. I need you. I felt something strange. Not anger, not pain, just distance. You didn't need me at the funeral, I reminded her. She inhaled sharply. Don't bring that up again. It never left, I replied. She started crying. Please, Ethan, can we meet? I looked around my quiet apartment. No, I said. You chose your path. So you're abandoning me? She accused. No, I answered steadily. I'm respecting myself. The next morning I had my first therapy session. I almost canceled twice before going in. Vanessa showed up at my office the morning. The papers were ready. She was dressed neatly. Hair pulled back, but her eyes told a different story, tired, fragile, unsure. I didn't think it would come to this, she said softly. I leaned against my desk and looked at her calmly. You made a choice, I replied. Her lips trembled. I made a mistake, she whispered. I shook my head. No, mistakes are accidents. You chose to ignore everything we had and walked away. She looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. I felt a strange mix of sadness and clarity. This wasn't about cruelty anymore. It was about truth. Mr. Klein sat across from us, papers neatly stacked. Everything is in order, he said. Ethan, you're protected. Vanessa, there are minimal claims you can make. The debt stays with you. She glanced at the contracts and then back at me. So there's nothing? Nothing that isn't yours already, I said. Her eyes filled with tears. I thought you would fight, she said. I shrugged lightly. Fighting that doesn't undo betrayal. She swallowed and nodded slowly. I wanted things to be fair. Fair? I echoed. Fair would have been showing up when it mattered. The room was quiet except for the faint scratch of pens and her shallow breathing. I handed her the papers. Sign, Mr. Klein instructed. She picked up the pen with trembling hands. I didn't look at her while she wrote. I focused on the window behind him, the sunlight spilling in across my desk. Each stroke she made on the paper felt like a closure I had waited for weeks to reach. She glanced at me once, eyes pleading. I didn't react. No anger, no words, just patience. A deep sense of knowing that what needed to happen was happening. The finality was bitter, but necessary. After she finished signing, she placed the pen down and exhaled loudly. "It's done," she said. "Yes," I replied quietly. There was no relief in her voice, only fatigue. "I never thought you'd actually leave," she whispered. I turned to her slowly. "You left first." "At my mother's funeral?" I said softly. Her face drained of color. Silence fell. She realized then the weight of her actions, but it was too late. I didn't gloat, I didn't yell. I simply nodded, feeling the gravity of the moment settle over both of us. Mr. Klein collected the papers and explained the final steps. Vanessa listened without interrupting, her lips pressed together. I stayed calm. There was no bitterness left to show, only the quiet satisfaction of standing in truth. When everything was done, she looked at me one last time, her eyes wet but empty of accusation. "Goodbye, Ethan," she murmured. I nodded. "Goodbye, Vanessa." I left the office with the weight of her absence pressing down. But beneath it, a strange lightness. I had survived betrayal. I had survived heartbreak. And I was finally free to start again. The day we were set to meet for the last time, I arrived early. The papers were on the table, crisp and final, and Vanessa was already there. She looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders slumped, eyes shadowed with fatigue. "I never thought you'd actually leave," she said quietly, almost as if she were testing me. I looked at her and breathed slowly. "You left first." "At my mother's funeral," I replied softly. Her lips trembled, and she looked down at her hands, twisting the rings on her fingers nervously. There was no shouting, no accusation, just the heavy silence of realization. She sat across from me as Mr. Klein organized the documents. I thought we could fix things," she whispered. I shook my head gently. "Some things don't get fixed, Vanessa. They end." She swallowed hard and looked up, her eyes glistening. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, almost pleading. I felt a pang of the old pain, but I didn't respond with anger. "Intentions don't erase consequences," I said quietly. The quiet in the room felt enormous, filled with all the words we never said and the moments we lost. Vanessa picked up the pen and hesitated over the first signature. Her hands shook. I watched her carefully, my chest tight but steady. "This feels like admitting defeat," she said softly. I didn't answer. I just nodded slightly and let her have the space she needed. One by one, she signed the documents, each stroke finalizing the end of our life together. Mr. Klein glanced at both of us. "That's it," he said. "It's official." I felt the weight of the papers in front of me, not as burden but as closure. When she set the pen down, Vanessa looked at me one last time. "Goodbye, Ethan," she said, voice trembling. I stood slowly and met her gaze. "Goodbye, Vanessa," I replied. The words were calm, almost gentle, but firm. No anger, no regret, just acceptance. She seemed to understand at that moment that nothing could bring back the trust she had broken. She nodded faintly and left the office, her steps slow, carrying away the echoes of the life we once shared. I remained seated for a long moment, staring at the papers. The silence in the room was different now, peaceful, final. I could feel the years of grief and betrayal begin to loosen their grip. My mother's memory came to me. Her voice soft in my mind. "Protect what you build, Ethan." I realized then that this goodbye was not just about Vanessa. It was about reclaiming myself. I had survived loss, deception, and heartbreak, and now I could finally move forward. Walking out of the office, I felt the air differently. The sunlight felt warmer, the streets quieter, and my steps lighter. I didn't look back, I didn't need to. I had carried the weight long enough, and now it was lifted. Grief lingered, but release had replaced bitterness. For the first time, I felt the possibility of living fully again. It wasn't happiness yet, but it was something stronger, clarity, freedom, and the knowledge that I could rebuild my life on my own terms. Months passed, and I settled into a routine that felt strange but necessary. I focused on work, pouring energy into projects that required my full attention. Claire Bennett, my old college friend, became a consistent presence, helping with listings and checking in without overstepping boundaries. Her quiet support was different from the chaos I had grown used to with Vanessa. We shared laughs about small things, coffee breaks that felt peaceful, and moments of honest conversation that reminded me trust could exist again. I realized that friendship could heal parts of me I thought were permanently broken. I found myself visiting my mother's grave regularly. The first few times were heavy with grief. I would kneel, tracing the stone with my fingers, whispering, "I finally listened to you, Mom." Her advice had guided me through decisions I never thought I would have to make. I talked to her about the house, about Vanessa, about the strange sense of calm that had settled over my life. I admitted my guilt for the anger I had felt and allowed myself to feel the sadness fully. With each visit, I left lighter, as if the weight of loss was gradually giving way to acceptance. Work became more than just a distraction. It became a source of purpose. I managed properties, helped clients find homes that meant something to them, and slowly rebuilt my financial security. Claire continued to be a grounding presence, always professional, but also encouraging when I doubted myself. "You're stronger than you think," she said one day, handing me a stack of contracts. And she was right. I felt capable in a way I hadn't before. The chaos of my marriage and the grief over my mother had stripped away pretenses and forced me to find my own resilience. Evenings were quiet. I cooked simple meals, read, and sometimes sat by the window watching the city lights flicker. I didn't feel lonely in the way I had with Vanessa because I was learning to be content with my own company. I reflected on the lessons I had learned, that love could be deceptive, that grief could teach strength, and that boundaries were essential for survival. I finally understood that peace was not found in possessions or approval, it was cultivated within. Every choice I made now, from small habits to major decisions, felt deliberate and freeing. The new home I purchased was modest compared to the dream house, but it suited me perfectly. It was quiet, simple, and entirely mine. I walked through the rooms and felt a sense of ownership that went beyond finances. It was emotional, psychological, spiritual. I could imagine years of growth here, of healing, of small joys. I locked the door gently, not to keep anyone out, but to protect what I had built within myself. The walls held no betrayal, no reminders of broken promises. Only the possibility of life lived fully, honestly, and with intention. Standing there, I felt the culmination of everything I had endured. The anger, the grief, the betrayal, they had all led me here. I understood now that the dream house had never been the dream. The dream was the peace I had found, the clarity I had gained, and the knowledge that I could build again from nothing and feel whole. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to smile, small but genuine, and step forward into a life shaped by my own hands and heart. I heard through mutual contacts that Vanessa had moved to another city after Marcus left her. Part of me expected to feel satisfaction, even triumph, but nothing came. I didn't celebrate her downfall, I didn't gloat, instead I felt done. It was a quiet, almost strange feeling, like exhaling after holding my breath too long. I sat in my modest apartment, surrounded by simple furniture, and realized that all the chaos, the betrayal, the grief, they had led me here. Not to revenge, not to anger, but to closure. I thought back to the months of turmoil, the sleepless nights replaying every insult, every lie, every missed call, and every decision she had made over me. At first, I had been consumed with rage, with imagining how I could make her pay, how karma could settle the score. But as time passed, I noticed something shifting. The bitterness that had burned inside me began to cool. The more I focused on my own growth, my own recovery, the less her actions mattered. I didn't need her downfall to validate my survival. One evening, I walked through a quiet neighborhood and stopped in front of a small house I had purchased alone. It wasn't the dream home my mother and I had envisioned years ago. It was smaller, simpler, but it was mine. I ran my hand over the door, feeling the smooth wood, and thought, this is protection, not imprisonment. No one had the power here but me. I unlocked it, stepped inside, and felt the weight of all past betrayals lift just slightly. This home wasn't about possessions. It was about peace. I sat by the window and let my mind wander. I remembered my mother's words, soft but firm. Protect what you build. I finally understood their meaning. It wasn't just about material things, it was about self-respect, boundaries, and the life you shape for yourself. The chaos I had endured, the loss I had survived, had given me insight into my own strength. I could live without her, without the past, without the constant pull of regret or anger. I could exist on my own terms. I thought of Vanessa one last time, not with hate, not with longing, but as a chapter that had closed. She had made her choices, I had made mine, and the paths we walked would never converge again. I allowed myself a small, genuine smile. Losing my mother had broken me. Losing my wife had freed me. That was the truth I held on to. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just the quiet satisfaction of standing tall, of having survived, and of knowing that my life now belonged to me alone. I locked the door gently behind me, Not to keep someone out, but to protect what I had rebuilt. The streets were quiet, the evening air crisp. I breathed in deeply, feeling the weight of the past lift with every exhale.